What is going on? Hope you're doing well. Been a minute, but been busy. It's been a fun summer so far. But today we're going to talk about some whiskey in the Word. We're going to pour a little James E. Pepper decanter. Going to talk about Matthew 6. Get this poured up. And this is I think quickly becoming my favorite chapter in the Bible. The older I get and the more I learn about myself and the way that things work in the world and the way that we work as individuals. Matthew 6 is a pretty profound chapter. I do want to get around to doing some, Christ and coffee, some cruising around and talking about some thoughts. I've got some different ideas for content for the channel, just haven't had time to implement them. It's been such a fun summer. Avery and I were able to take a father-daughter trip out to East Tennessee to a big Porsche rally, which that video's here on the channel. Aaron and I have done a lot of travel for barrel picks, done a lot of date nights, things like that. We've had a good time as well. Lots of family time with family here and elsewhere. We've been visiting or had people here. It's been an awesome summer. Been very blessed with health and happiness all summer long. Hopefully you've had much of the same. But if you haven't, I totally get that too. I'm more and more harping on these seasons of life. And if you go back and look at the last couple videos, I mentioned a video about the seasons of life. And that has just continued to be more profound for me. But what I want to talk about today is a specific section of Matthew 6. And it kind of keys in on something that I heard in a recent sermon, where the sermon was talking, it wasn't wrong by any means what the pastor was saying, but the gist of what he was saying was that the human heart is wicked and we have to be diligent and mindful of our own proclivities and shortcomings. And that is 100% true. But I think the reason that kind of gets me a little bit, or it made me think a layer beyond, was, yes, we do have a tendency to be our own worst enemy a lot of times, and we should know our shortcomings and our weaknesses so that we can address them. But doing that specifically is what I like to call behavior modification. It's not something I came up with, but I've heard that term before. Like modifying your own behavior through your own behaving to try to earn your way into heaven or something like that. And that's not what this pastor was saying, but it was more about being on top of your own thoughts, feelings, reactions. And again, all important things, I think, to be aware of. I know that sweets are my biggest downfall. A lot of people struggle with alcohol. If you struggle with alcohol, you shouldn't be around alcohol. I struggle with other things. One of the things I struggle with is being mad at other drivers for not being able to drive well. Well, my job is driving for UPS, so I do tend to get mad, and it's tough for me to remove myself from that situation. So I do have to work on self-control. But what I think is so much more helpful than just trying to willpower your way into being a better version of you, if you're going to call yourself a Christian, or even if you're not a Christian and you're watching this and you're just curious, maybe God for some reason has this video pop up in your feed. And that's how God works. He works in mysterious ways like that. A lot of times people are like, oh, what does that even mean to be a Christian? And Christians are broken people just like everyone. So unfortunately, they're like the worst calling card for the thing that they're trying to talk about, myself included. But at the end of the day, really the answer is just Jesus. The example that he lived to be a Christian is to strive to be Christ-like. And what I've found, personally speaking, and I've seen this in other people as well, this isn't an anecdotal thing for myself. The more you learn about the character of Jesus by reading his word, reading his stories, getting familiar with the life that he lived, the more that you get to know that version of Jesus and not just like the, common knowledge, version of Jesus that we get fed publicly or societally. Once you actually get to know the real version of Jesus and you want to be more like him, that desire to be more like him outweighs your own desires. And ultimately, it really is that simple. Do you desire to be like Jesus, or do you desire to do what you want to do? And you have to want to be more like Jesus than to fulfill your own wants and wishes. I personally would love to just eat sugar all day and chill. Like, that would be great, but I would be slothful. I would be unhealthy. That's not serving myself. That's not serving my body well. That's not serving my family well. And it's not living into the life that Jesus called me to live. So I don't do that. Now, do I indulge sometimes? Yeah, I do. We just got back from my wife, Erin. Her family has a cousin camp every year. Her sister makes a bunch of cookies for all the little kids. It's like 36 people, her siblings, children, all this stuff. And there's like dozens and dozens of cookies and sweet drinks and all that stuff. And I do indulge a little bit, but I try to keep it in check. But I can't live like that all the time. I have to keep things in check to try to stay, to try to live into the example that Jesus sets for us. And I know that kind of sounds silly. It's like, oh, he's talking about sweets and cookies and also the life that Jesus lived. Well, in the Bible, it tells us that our body is a temple and that we are supposed to take care of it as if it were the temple that we worship Jesus in, because surprise, surprise, it is. Like, your relationship with God is a very internal thing until you externalize it and talk about it. But the verse I want to get to specifically is Matthew 6, specifically verse 33, but we'll start in 31 just to get the full context of all of this. Before we get into that, let's get a little sip of this James E. Pepper decanter. These are batch. This is 54.8% ABV, so that would be, oh boy, math. It says it's 5 years old, 109.6 proof. So this happened to be selected by the master distiller. I picked this up at the distillery when we were up in the Lexington area recently. Cheers. Oh, that smells really good. Really like caramel honey sweet. Just sweet, a little bit of spice to kind of offset the sweetness. Really nice. Doesn't have a big age impact, but beautiful bottle. Super easy sipper for the proof point. I really like that a lot. I think this is like $60 or something like that. Very happy with that for that price. But let's get into this real quick. Verse 31 in Matthew 6, it says, "So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them." And then here is the crux of it all. Verse 33, "For me. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Super simple. Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. When we have situations where we're perhaps being our own worst enemy, I think it's really important for us to ask ourselves, what are we actually seeking in those moments? Are we seeking our own pleasure? Are we seeking our own safety? Are we seeking our own security? Or are we seeking his kingdom and his righteousness and trusting that he's got us the rest of the way? So when I hear, a sermon and they're talking about, be mindful of your heart and the proclivities that we have to seek our own, self-satisfying ways, I get it, but I feel like there's like one step more that needs to be made, which is, well, how do we do it? Well, be alert and aware of your own shortcomings and your own follies. And I actually listened to a roundtable recently that had a bunch of people on it, including Tim Tebow, Jeff Foxworthy, and they were talking about this, and they were saying that, like, if it were a game, like a football game, you scout the other team, you find out what their weaknesses are, and you exploit them. And our spiritual life is not much different. Like, the devil knows where we're weakest, and he's gonna try to attack us in those points. And he doesn't always just like bust in the front door and like, hey, I'm here, to make you do something you shouldn't be doing. It's oftentimes much more sly than that, much more sneaky than that. It could be just like a little thought, or just like, these little small subtle ways to kind of chip away at you and your willpower, for lack of a better word. But if we're seeking his kingdom and his righteousness ahead of our own or anything else, we align with that, and then we become that, you know? The perfect example here is that I heard somebody who was trying to lose weight, and they were talking about the decisions they were making. And somebody asked them, they said, this fairly prominent person, and they said, hey, how are you losing weight? How are you doing it? And he goes, and I don't mean to offend anybody with this. This is a direct quote. He said, I just stopped doing things that fat people do. He's like, I stopped drinking a bunch of sodas. I stopped eating a bunch of sweets. I started working out. I think we sometimes shortchange the fact that we are a culmination of and a compilation of the decisions that we make on a day-to-day basis. So if it's personal health and you're eating healthy foods and you're exercising and you're moving your body and you're not overeating and you're not overindulging, you're probably going to look like a fairly healthy person. If you're not moving and you're being sedentary and you're eating really bad foods and drinking a bunch of sodas or alcohol, things like that, you're going to not be a healthy person. Like you're just the culmination of the decisions that you make. But I think what we fail to realize sometimes as well is that we don't apply that to our behavior. We don't think to ourselves, what do we want our character to be like, and what decisions can I make to that end to get me to that point? If I find $100 bill laying on the ground, everybody's natural inclination is to pick that up and keep it for themselves. Nobody's natural inclination is to pick it up and take it to someone at like, let's say it's outside of a business or establishment, to take it to that place and ask them if somebody might have dropped it. That's not our proclivity, but a more trustworthy, honest, principled person makes the decision anyway to go take that to try to find the owner of it versus seeing it and being self-serving and keeping it for themselves. It's just the decisions that you make. And if we seek first his kingdom and his righteousness and align ourselves with that, then that tends to bear out in our life in other ways that both bring us joy and peace just from living that way, and then also in ways that other people can see. And, I guarantee if I weren't living this way, that my wife would not have been attracted to me or wanted to be involved with me if I were not a person of character. Nor would I wanted to be involved with her if she wasn't a person of character. I don't think my daughter would respect me if I wasn't behaving in a certain way. If I was just, acting out of full self-serving, motives. I don't think that she would respect me or follow the directions that I give her, trusting and knowing that I have her best interest in my heart. And I think that's really what it comes down to. This is all a matter of the heart. And I think the kind of the misnomer that we get a little bit here, if that's the right word, which I'm sure it's not, but kind of the misunderstanding we have is that like some people are good and some people are bad and this, that, and the other. We all have good and bad within us. We all have temptations. I heard it said recently, temptations are tempting because if they're not tempting, they wouldn't be temptations. We all have certain temptations in our lives. It's up to us whether we succumb to them or not. And again, circling back to the beginning of what spurred this video was hearing a pastor talk about being diligent about this and mindful about this and guarding our hearts against our own ways and the pitfalls that we can set for ourselves in our own behaviors. And that is true, but to take it one step further, how do we do that? What's the action step? Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. Align ourselves with that, and all these things will be given to you as well. God will take care of everything else if we just seek his kingdom and righteousness. So this means a lot to me the older I get. This goes on to say in verse 34, therefore do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Amen. Like that, yeah. Each day has enough trouble of its own. We don't need to overly complicate things. Just live into the person that God has called us to be, and a lot of stuff takes care of itself. And I'd urge you to read this specific section of Matthew 6, but I really urge you to go back to the beginning of Matthew 6 and read this whole chapter. It's a fairly quick read. This is a study Bible, so really the text is only up here. The bottom half is a study Bible and notes, so it's not a very long read. It's only 34 verses. You could read this in under 5 minutes easy. But maybe read it a couple times and try to internalize some of it. Get another sip of this before we get out of here. It's just good. It's not great, but it's very good. Beautiful bottle. Make a great gift for somebody. Highly recommend checking this out if you haven't. It was all the rage when it first came out, and then it kind of died off, and nobody talked about it seemingly for years. I hadn't heard about this bottle for 2 or 3 years now. So I just grabbed another one, and I'm reminded why we should be buying this and supporting companies that are putting out good products like this, especially when it's a fair price, $60-65. I'd buy this over a Blanton's any day of the week. This is much better than a Blanton's. So, all right, going to get out of here. We'll see you guys when we see you guys, whenever that will be. I'm going to try to start getting some more content out. Our busy season for the year is kind of wrapped up. All of our travel. We've got one more event to do at the end of July, Barrels for Hope charity event. And then after that, we should have a pretty wide open schedule as far as like what the rest of the year looks like. There's always stuff that pops up. School goes back in the session for Avery. So we've got a lot of stuff coming up in that regard. But I've got some wrenching I'm going to do on the Cayman. I'm going to do a complete suspension overhaul. So I've got some wrenching and some grease monkeying work to do, but I enjoy that. It gives me a way to get away and kind of clear my head and work on something. But we'll leave you there this week. We'll see you next time. Cheers. Have a great summer.